Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Don't Breathe 2, which is a highly anticipated sequel for Don't Breathe, which came out I believe in 2016. And I have a little history with Don't Breathe. It's one of those movies where, I love horror movies. It's my favorite genre of movies. And Don't Breathe was actually the first horror movie I saw because when I was younger, I never watched any horror movies. I was too scared to do it. And now I absolutely love them. I'm not scared of horror movies whatsoever. I watch them for the characters and for the story because I truly do believe that horror is one of the best genres to push a character to their absolute limits, to push them to either go in their forward moving arc or in a backwards moving arc. Because you have movies like The Shining and Hereditary, where it's like a downward spiral for characters, or you have movies like Don't Breathe, which is a very sympathetic character, or a movie towards the robbers, and how this guy was truly evil and he does these terrible things and they just fell in a situation that they just could not get out of because of the unstoppable force that Stephen Lang's character was in the first movie. So I truly did love the first movie, and I do kind of credit that for being my first horror movie that I ever watched, and a horror movie that got me into the genre in general. And so I was excited for this new one. I knew that the first one ended in a way that kind of set up for a sequel, and so I knew it was always a possibility. And seeing the trailer for this one, my biggest fears were realized in the trailer of what they could do for a Don't Breathe sequel. And unfortunately, after watching this movie, it is absolutely trash and garbage. I hated Don't Breathe 2 with a burning passion, and I'm going to be talking about full spoilers because this movie does some truly baffling things. And so yeah, like I said, spoiler video. If you have not seen this movie, don't watch this video, or since I'm not recommending you guys watch this movie, especially if you've seen the first one, then who cares? Let's just jump right into the spoilers for this movie. But before I get into my hatred of this movie, I want to talk about some positives first, because there are some positives. Of course, there's no movie that's truly completely garbage unless it's Smurfs 2, but this one has some bright sides to it. So I will say that the directing in this movie is fairly well done. I think the director actually has some sort of, style with him, or some sort of passion with the movement of the camera, because a lot of the movement in this movie was very well done. A lot of the shots are very well composed. This is a very clean and well made movie, and I think the performances that he got out of, especially Stephen Lang, of course, as his character, is very solid, but especially the young actress who plays the little girl in this movie is very, very solid as well. Unfortunately, that is where my positives end, because this movie makes a terrible mistake, and that is by making Stephen Lang's character a sympathetic hero in this movie, even though he was such a disgusting and vile human being in the first one. And that's a fact that I just could not get over throughout the entire movie. If you've seen the first movie, you know his character. He was a character he was a veteran, and his daughter was killed in a car accident. And what he did was he kidnapped the woman responsible for killing his daughter in that accident, and told her essentially that since you took my daughter away from her, or from me, you need to give me back a child. And so he basically impregnates her and is going to hold her captive for 9 months until, a new child can be born for him. And that is super, super messed up. There's a very disturbing scene in that first movie with the turkey baster, and it's very messed up. And this guy is truly messed up, and he's a truly unstoppable force too when he's fighting with Dylan Minnette. It's so intense because you're rooting for Dylan Minnette to get out of this situation, because he's kind of a sympathetic robber, I guess, and this guy is such an unstoppable force, and you want him to survive this situation, but he's just too overbearingly just badass in the first one, and so you just can't escape this guy. And that's what made the first one so good. In this movie, now you're showing him as a hero, essentially, and I think that was just very damning for this movie, because I could never care about his character because of the knowledge that I had of the first movie, and I could never care about the true villains of this movie because they were truly also terrible people. The only person I can care about is this poor little girl who's stuck in this terrible situation. So what is the story of this movie? Essentially, Stephen Lang is taking care of this little girl, and you have these people that are kind of stalking her around town, and they follow her back to Stephen Lang's house, and they start breaking in and trying to find this little girl for whatever reason. You find out later that is because Stephen Lang's character kidnapped her as a child and raised her for 8 years. So this movie takes place like 8 or 10 years after the original one. But you find out pretty quickly that these people that are looking for this little girl are also terrible people, because there's this woman in the beginning of the movie who's driving the little girl around town and is super nice, and they just straight up bash her with a hammer at the beginning of this movie for absolutely no reason. And it's just like, just explain to her that this man kidnapped your daughter, and then she'll go in, pick her up, drive her back to you. That's as simple as it gets. It's very, very easily solution to your problem, my guy. You don't have to kill this poor woman for absolutely no reason. That's the first dumb mistake that these terrible goons make throughout this entire movie. And they're looking for this little girl. That's when that scene happens where the little girl is kind of teleporting around the house with some sort of abilities to be able to sneak through everything during that wonder. Even though I did like that wonder, I did think it was a little bit over the top with how she was escaping these goons. But it's essentially very similar to the first one. It's a home invasion thing. You have Stephen Lang defending his home, murdering a bunch of people in very brutal ways. And one scene that I thought was absolutely hysterical. So here we go. Stephen Lang goes to the garage. He's trying to patch up his wound with some glue, and this one goon goes in there, and the goon makes a stupid mistake of shutting the garage door behind him, even though he knows that he's going into a room with this psychopath, blind, murderous guy that is a terrible person. And so he goes in there, shuts the door behind him so he has no escape routes, and he essentially gets grabbed, and you don't know what happens to him. So his brother walks into the garage, and he sees that his nose and mouth are glued shut, so he cannot breathe. So what does the brother do to save him? Even though he can somewhat open his mouth and you can see the gap where his mouth is supposed to be, or his nostrils or anything, no, the brother just stabs him in the cheek so he can breathe. Very, very dumb. And honestly, I didn't know they were brothers until the end of the movie where he's like, "You killed my brother." And it was such a funny thing that he just stabbed him in the cheek. I honestly believe that he stabbed him in the cheek because he wanted to get at his brother for some stupid reason. And the reason why this is so stupid is because the brother, who's on the ground with a hole in his cheek now, he just slices his mouth open with a piece of glass anyway. So why didn't the brother do that in the first place? If you're going to slice his mouth open with some glass right after the fact that you stab him in the cheek, why didn't you just stab him, or why didn't you just cut his mouth open in the first place? It would have been so much easier without stabbing your brother in the face. It was so incredibly dumb. I started cracking up laughing because I just couldn't help it. It was so unbelievably stupid. And so that's just to tell you guys how dumb these villainous goon characters are in this movie. They're really, really stupid. And this main guy, the dad to the real girl, that's why they're trying to break in and kidnap her back, is essentially because the dad wants his daughter back. He was put in jail because he blew up a meth lab in the basement of his home, causing the girl to, stumble out of the burning home to be picked up by Stephen Lang's character in the first place. So he's clearly a terrible person as well. And you find out some even more terrible things about him and his wife once, they're able to get the little girl out of Stephen Lang's clutches. They burn down his house. They escape back to their little, weird warehouse place apartment thing that they go to, and you find out that the mom's character, because of that explosion and fire, had a bunch of damage to her lungs and to her heart, and so she needs a heart transplant. Who does she need a heart transplant from? She needs a heart transplant from this poor little girl who is bounced between a kidnapper dad to now a dad who's trying to murder her and cut her heart open while she's still breathing. That is pretty messed up. And so I see what the filmmakers are trying to do. If you hadn't seen that first movie before and you didn't know the context of what Steve Lang's character would be, you would honestly be on his side. Even though he still kidnapped this little girl, her situation was better with him than she would have been with her actual parents who are literally trying to kill her to steal her heart. And so it's just I see what you guys are doing as writers, as filmmakers for this movie. It just doesn't work with the context of the first one. It truly is baffling to me that they try to make Steve Lang's character so sympathetic and they put in these stupid ass real parents for this girl in order to balance that out. It was just really dumb. And so you have a bunch of just murder scenes in this warehouse by Stephen Lang, just absolutely just gutting these people in a very Saw-like way. He's very cinematic about the way that he kills these people. It's not like in the first one where he was just an unstoppable force. Like I said, he wasn't just strangling people to death. He was doing it in very playful ways, which was kind of like Saw. Like I said, he glued a guy's mouth and nose shut, which is very, very slow way to kill somebody. But he's able to foil the plans of the parents, and she's being wheelchaired out, and the mom has the little girl in her clutches, and the lights go out, and the dad is just kind of shooting everywhere to see where Stephen Lang is. But of course he works better in the darkness like the first movie was, even though he does things in this movie where you kind of need to be able to see. He's in a place he's never been before. It made sense in the first one because he got so used to his own home, he was able to shut off the lights and trap these other home breakers in his basement and he was able to maneuver around there super easily, that makes sense. And him in this random ass place being able to maneuver around this guy who's just shooting blindly into the darkness, possibly gonna shoot his wife or this little girl that he needs the heart from. It was so dumb because he shoots his wife and she's dead, and she starts falling in the swimming pool with the little girl like holding this bar with her feet, and she's being yanked into this pool, and so she grabs a machete and starts slicing off the arm of this of her mother, which is super messed up. And that's another point where I started laughing because that is just such a baffling thing to happen. And the funniest part about the scene is she falls in the well, or she falls inside of the swimming pool anyways, and there's absolutely no point to cutting off the mom's arm. It was just, oh my gosh, it was so unbelievably bad. And so the movie continues to try to make you care about Steve Lang's character. He tells the little girl after he kills, or at least you think he kills, the dad, he like pushes his thumbs into his eye sockets, which is a very, very absurdly gruesome scene. And the little girl is standing there and she's calling out to her, I guess, kidnapping dad and Steve Lang's character, and he's telling her to run away because he's done terrible things in the past. And that's the first time where he kind of admits, and that's, I guess, his character, he's admitting that he's a terrible person, even though we've known that the entire time. Like, way to go, man, you finally admitted that you raped and killed and murdered so many people. Yes, you're a terrible person, you're a terrible father, you should never be a father. And she accepts his apology because she saves his life by stabbing her real dad when he is about to kill Stephen Lang's character, which he does, in fact, kill Stephen Lang's character. And you have this trying to be emotional moment between, Stephen Lang and this little girl. And, he's dying in her arms like Logan. But unfortunately, he's not Hugh Jackman. He hasn't had 11 years in this role. And so you don't care in the slightest about this guy dying. Because the entire movie, I've been wanting him to die, along with all these other characters in this movie. The only characters I cared about were the little girl and this random other guy who's like, what you're doing is wrong. And he was able to help Stephen Lang essentially get out of the situation that he was in earlier in this like final act. And so those were the only two characters I liked. Everybody else, I was honestly waiting for them to die. And so I'm glad they killed Steve Lang's character. I'm glad this little girl got away from everything. But then the last moments of the movie happen. She runs out to this little, children's shelter that she saw earlier in the movie because she was kind of craving some actual, friends in life, because Stephen Lang was so sheltered for her. And so he was a terrible father even when he was, taking care of her. She even wanted then to get out of his grasp, essentially. And so she goes to this children's home and they ask her what her name is. And instead of using her real name, she uses the name that her kidnapper gave her. How messed up is that? How twisted and screwed up is this little girl gonna be because she grew up with this kidnapper and she got feelings for this, father figure that she had? That is so messed up. It just was, this movie lost me in every way. Every single scene in this movie was just like, it was bafflingly bad. This movie was a massive disappointment, guys. There's a lot of very, very funny, unintentionally funny scenes in this movie. I was laughing by the end of it. None of the tension worked because I wanted everybody to die. I didn't care for a single person. The little girl to a very small extent, but that was mainly because she was a good actress. And so this movie, man, I hated this movie. So what did you guys think of the first Don't Breathe movie? Comment that down below. That's what I want to talk about. Are you guys going to see Don't Breathe 2? Have you seen it? What did you guys think of it? And of course, I did upload my free guy review at the same time as I uploaded this one. Hopefully at the same time, if not a few hours apart. So what did you guys think of both of those movies? Subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one, and to see, again, that free guy review and The Suicide Squad spoiler review that I had just last week as well. So thanks, everybody, for watching me rant about this movie. I enjoyed doing it, and I hope you guys did too. So thanks, guys, for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next one.